Her hands didn't shake. Not when she carried a tray laden with crystal glasses worth more than her rent. And not now, as she stared into the eyes of a man who could buy the entire city block and not notice the expense. He was smiling that easy practiced smile that had charmed senators and supermodels, but all she felt was the familiar bitter burn of condescension. "You have a fire in you," he'd murmured, his voice a low thrum of power. With the weight of her dreams pressing down on her and the exhaustion of a double shift settling into her bones, she did the one thing he never expected. She extinguished the fire for him. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet but unyielding, "my job is to serve your dinner, not your ego. Please enjoy your meal." The silence that followed was louder than any argument, and in that moment, Mia had no idea she hadn't just ended a conversation. She had ignited a fuse. The air in Æthelgard's was thick with the scent of money and seared meat. It was an old scent, one that had seeped into the dark mahogany walls and the plush burgundy carpets over decades of hushed deals and celebratory cognacs. For Mia Alvarez, 27, and perpetually in motion, it was the smell of survival. She moved through the labyrinth of tables with a practiced grace, her black uniform a stark silhouette against the dim gilded light. Her smile was a part of the uniform, too, a polite, unobtrusive curve of the lips that revealed nothing and invited no questions. Tonight, however, her smile was wearing thin. The source of its erosion was seated at table 12, a prime piece of real estate overlooking the park currently occupied by Julius Croft. To most of the staff, he was just Mr. Croft, a regular who tipped outrageously and had a quiet, intense way of observing the room. They didn't know he was the Julius Croft, the reclusive founder of a tech empire called Nexus Dynamics, a man whose digital fingerprints were on everything from satellite communications to the AI suggesting what you should watch next. They just knew he was rich, and in a place like Æthelgard's, that was all that mattered. Mia knew. She was a student of the world beyond these walls, a voracious reader of everything she could get her hands on, from financial news to tech journals. She knew Croft's reputation, a ruthless innovator, a shark in a bespoke suit. And for the past 3 weeks, he had made her his personal project. It started with small things, a lingering gaze, a question about her day that felt a little too personal. "That's a beautiful name, Mia. Is it short for something?" he'd asked last week, his voice a low baritone that seemed to cut through the restaurant's din. She'd given him the standard professional answer. "Just Mia, sir." Tonight he had escalated. He'd dismissed his dinner guest early and had been nursing a glass of Macallan 25, his eyes following her every move. When she'd approached to clear his plates, he'd spoken. "You move with such purpose," he said, not looking at the plates but directly at her, "like you're on a mission." "Just trying to do a good job, sir," she replied, her hands working efficiently. He chuckled a soft, rich sound. "I doubt that. I think you're planning a great escape. You have a fire in you. I can see it." And that was the line, the one that felt less like a compliment and more like an appraisal, as if he were judging livestock, as if her kia was a commodity he could observe and perhaps acquire. This was the core of Mia's existence, a deep, roaring bonfire of ambition she kept carefully banked and hidden. Every dollar she earned, every exhausting double shift she pulled, was kindling for that fire. It was for Aura Brew, the business plan that lived in a worn, leather-bound notebook under her mattress. Aura Brew wasn't just a coffee shop. It was a revolution in a cup. Ethically sourced beans from a women-run cooperative in Colombia she'd been corresponding with for months. A living wage for its employees. A community space with free Wi-Fi and workshops. It was her answer to a world of sterile chains and corporate greed. It was her great escape. And Julius Croft, with his easy charm and predatory gaze, was the very thing she was trying to escape from. He represented a world where power was a plaything, where people like her were decorative, amusing, and ultimately disposable. So she met his gaze, the practiced, pleasant mask falling away for just a second, revealing the unyielding steel beneath. The air between them crackled. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying the weight of her conviction. "My job is to serve your dinner, not your ego. Please enjoy your meal." She didn't wait for a response. She simply took the plates and walked away. Her back straight, her heart hammering against her ribs. Not with fear, but with a strange, exhilarating defiance. She could feel his eyes on her all the way to the kitchen doors. The usual kitchen chaos, the clang of pans, the shouts of chefs was a welcome cacophony. Her friend and fellow waitress Chloe sidled up to her, her eyes wide. "Did you just shut down Mr. Moneybags at table 12? Mia stacked the plates with meticulous care. He was being inappropriate. Inappropriate Mia the man tips in hundreds. He could be your fairy godmother. "I don't need a fairy godmother," Mia said, her voice tight. "I need to pay my rent, and I'd rather do it without being someone's evening entertainment." But as she worked through the rest of her shift, a cold knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. Ethel Guards catered to the powerful. A complaint from a man like Julius Croft wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was a death sentence for her job. The job that, for all its indignities, was the only thing keeping her and her dream afloat. She thought of her tiny apartment in Queens, the stack of bills on her counter, the worn-out pages of her business plan. Had her moment of pride just cost her everything? When she finally left the restaurant close to 2 a.m., the city air was cool against her flushed cheeks. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and the sour taste of regret. She replayed the scene in her mind. His look of stunned silence. The way his easy smile had vanished, replaced by an expression she couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't anger. It was calculation. The knot in her stomach tightened. She walked home under the halos of the streetlights, feeling smaller and more vulnerable than she had all night. The fire he'd spoken of felt very far away, now reduced to a tiny flickering ember in the cold, lonely dark. The morning after was worse. Mia woke with a start, the shrill cry of her alarm clock, feeling like an accusation. Every creak of her floorboards, every siren wailing in the distance, seemed to echo the same thought. "You're fired. You're fired. You're fired." Her apartment was a testament to a life lived on the margins of a dream. It was small but meticulously organized. On her cramped desk, stacks of books on sustainable agriculture and business management sat next to a laptop that was at least 5 years old. Pinned to a corkboard above it were swatches of color earthy greens, warm terracottas, the calming blue of a dawn sky. This was the visual palette for Aura Brew. Next to them were photos of smiling women on a Colombian coffee farm, printouts from her email correspondence with the cooperative's leader, a woman named Eleanor. This was her real world. Ethel Guards was just the portal, the price of admission. She spent the morning in a fog of anxiety, triple-checking her Aura Brew financials, trying to distract herself. The numbers were stark, her savings were meager. Losing her job now would set her back at least a year, maybe more. The weight of it was suffocating. She pictured herself having to email Elena, telling her there would be a delay. The thought was humiliating. When she got the call from her manager, Mr. Dubois, her heart plummeted. "Mia, can you come in an hour early for your shift today? I need to see you in my office." The request was delivered in his usual clipped formal tone, but Mia could read between the lines. An hour early. His office. This was it. The execution. She dressed for her shift with the grim resignation of a soldier, heading into a battle she knew she would lose. She even put her worn leather notebook, her Aura Brew Bible, into her tote bag. A talisman, perhaps. A reminder of what she was fighting for, even in defeat. The walk into Ethel Gard's felt different. The familiar scent of money and meat now smelled of judgment. The clinking glasses sounded like whispers. Chloe saw her pass and gave her a look of profound pity, mouthing, "I'm so sorry." Mr. Dubois's office was an antechamber of dread. It was small, windowless, and dominated by a large mahogany desk that was always immaculately tidy. He was a man who valued order above all else, and Mia knew her defiance of a patron like Mr. Croft was the ultimate form of disorder. She stood before his desk, her hands clasped behind her back. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Dubois." He didn't ask her to sit. He simply stared at her for a long moment, his face impassive. "Alvarez," he began. "This establishment prides itself on a certain standard of service, a standard of discretion and accommodation. Our clientele expects it. They pay for it." Mia braced herself. "I understand, sir." "Do you?" "Because your behavior last night with Mr. Croft at table 12 would suggest otherwise. An official complaint was lodged." There it was. The guillotine had fallen. A bitter metallic taste filled her mouth. "I see. I apologize if my actions—" He held up a hand, cutting her off. "Save the apology. It is not my place to receive it." He paused, his expression shifting from stern to something she couldn't identify. Bafflement. Mr. Croft was very specific in his complaint. He said you were unreceptive and dismissive. He also said, and here Dubois's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly, that you were the most interesting person he's met in the last 5 years. Mia blinked. That was not what she was expecting. Dubois reached into a drawer and pulled out a long rectangular envelope. It was made of thick, creamy cardstock, the kind of paper that probably cost more per sheet than Mia made in an hour. Her name, Miss Mia Alvarez, was written across the front in elegant, looping calligraphy. There was no stamp, no address. It had been delivered by hand. "He left this for you," Dubois said, holding it out to her. His voice was laced with a bewildered curiosity he couldn't quite conceal. "His driver brought it this morning. I must admit, in my 20 years of managing this restaurant, I have never encountered a situation quite like this." Her fingers trembled slightly as she took the envelope. It felt heavy, important. She looked from the envelope to her manager's face, searching for a clue, a hint of what this meant. He offered none. He simply nodded towards the door. "That will be all, Alvarez. Your shift starts in 30 minutes. Dismissed, but not fired. Mia walked out of the office in a daze. She found a quiet corner in the staff locker room, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. With unsteady hands, she broke the wax seal on the back, an intricate JC monogram, and slid out the single thick card inside. The message was printed in the same formal, expensive font, Ms. Alvarez, your candor last night was as unexpected as it was refreshing. You were correct. I was testing the boundaries, and you established them with admirable fortitude. That quality is rare and frankly far more valuable than sycophantic pleasantries. My assistant informs me that waitressing at Ethelgard's is not your sole ambition, that you are, in her words, working on something. A business plan. I am intrigued by people who possess both fire and focus. So I would like to extend an invitation. This Saturday at 2 p.m., I will be hosting a small gathering of associates aboard my yacht, the Serenity, docked at Chelsea Piers. I invite you to join us, not as a guest for cocktails, but to pitch your dream. You will have 30 minutes to convince me and my team why your something is worth my attention. Consider it an audition. Impress me. Sincerely, Julius Croft. P.S. A car will be waiting for you at your residence at 1 p.m. Dress code is business professional. Mia read the card once, then twice, then a third time, her brain struggling to process the words. A yacht. Chelsea Piers. Pitch your dream. It was insane. It was impossible. This wasn't how the world worked. Billionaires didn't offer opportunities to waitresses who insulted them. It had to be a joke. A cruel, elaborate prank designed to humiliate her further. But the card in her hands was real. The weight of it, the scent of the expensive paper, the precision of the embossed letters. It was all undeniably real. A torrent of conflicting emotions crashed over her. Suspicion warred with a worse terrifying hope. Was this just another more sophisticated form of flirting? A power play on a grander scale? Lure the little waitress onto his floating palace, dangle an opportunity, and see how she performs. The cynicism that had been her armor for so long screamed that it was a trap. But then another voice, the one that whispered to her late at night as she sketched out cafe layouts and calculated profit margins, asked a different question. What if it's not? What if, by some miracle, her one act of authentic defiance had broken through the shell of a man so insulated by wealth that he'd forgotten what genuine character looked like? What if this was the 1 in a billion shot she'd been working for? She looked at the card again. Impress me. The command was arrogant, audacious. But it wasn't a request for a date. It was a challenge. And if there was one thing Mia Alvarez never did, it was back down from a challenge. The knot of anxiety in her stomach was still there. But now it was shot through with sparks of pure, unadulterated adrenaline. She had 3 days. 3 days to turn her leather-bound dream into a weapon. 3 days to prepare for the audition of her life. Fired numb. She was about to step into the lion's den. The next 72 hours were a blur of caffeine anxiety and relentless obsessive work. Mia's tiny queen's apartment transformed into a war room. The corkboard of dreams became a battle plan. Her laptop, usually groaning under the strain of a few open browser tabs, was pushed to its absolute limit. Ethelgard's became a distant memory, a hazy, dreamlike place she moved through on autopilot. She traded shifts, pleaded with Chloe to cover for her, and survived on stale coffee and the sheer terrifying force of the opportunity before her. The first thing she did was call the one person she trusted implicitly, her older brother, Matteo. He was a high school history teacher, pragmatic and protective, the anchor to her soaring ambition. She read him the invitation over the phone, her voice trembling slightly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "A yacht," Matteo finally said, his voice heavy with skepticism. "Mia, this sounds like the beginning of a very bad movie. The guy flirts with you, you shoot him down, so he invites you to his private boat. Do you hear how that sounds? It's not like that, Matty," she insisted, pacing her small living room. "The card says, pitch your dream. It says business professional. He's got associates. This is a real meeting. Or it's a real creep with a very offensive and creative way of getting what he wants. Julius Croft. I know that name. The guy's a predator, a corporate raider. He buys companies, strips them for parts, and lays off thousands of people. He's not a patron of the arts, Mia. He's a shark, and he's inviting you into the water." His words were a cold shower, dousing the fragile flame of her hope. Every point he made was valid. The doubt she'd been trying to suppress came roaring back, a tidal wave of imposter syndrome. Who was she? A waitress with a notebook full of ideas. She was about to walk onto a yacht owned by a man who moved markets with a single phone call and pitch him a coffee shop. It sounded ridiculous even to her. "I have to do this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What if it's real? When will I ever get another chance like this? And what if it's not?" Matteo countered, his voice softening. "Just be careful. Keep your head on a swivel. Don't drink anything they offer you. And for God's sake, text me the second you get on that boat and the second you get off. Promise me." "I promise," she said, the weight of his worry settling on her shoulders. After the call, she sank onto her couch, the enormity of the task ahead crashing down on her. It wasn't enough to have a good idea anymore. She had to present it to a room of hardened capitalists who likely saw businesses like hers as a rounding error on their balance sheets. Her passion, her belief in community and ethical sourcing, would that translate into language they understood? The language of ROI scalability and market disruption. With a surge of renewed determination, she turned to her laptop. If she was going to face the shark, she needed to know everything about him. She dove deep past the glossy magazine profiles and into the dense archives of business journals and financial news. Matteo was right. The stories painted a picture of a ruthless pragmatist. He'd orchestrated hostile takeovers. He'd dismantled legacy companies. The media called him the architect for his ability to build new empires from the rubble of old ones. But then she found something else. Tucked away in smaller publications were articles about the Croft Foundation, a private philanthropic entity with a surprisingly large endowment. It funded STEM education in underserved communities. It invested in green technology startups. There was a story about him anonymously paying off the medical debt for an entire town in rural West Virginia, after a factory which his company had acquired and shut down had left the community devastated. The man was a paradox, a destroyer and a creator, a shark who occasionally behaved like a savior. This discovery didn't calm her nerves, it complicated them. It meant he wasn't a simple villain. He was something far more dangerous, unpredictable. Her focus shifted to the pitch itself. Her leather notebook was filled with heart and soul, but it lacked the cold, hard data Julius Croft and his team would demand. The next 2 days were a frantic race to build a corporate shell around her dream. She spent hours in the public library using their databases to research market analysis, consumer trends in specialty coffee, and projected growth for ethically sourced products. She built spreadsheets charting out 5-year financial projections with best case, worst case, and realistic scenarios. She created a detailed breakdown of startup costs, from the rent on a hypothetical storefront in Brooklyn to the exact cost of importing a container of green coffee beans from Elena's cooperative in Colombia. She crafted her story. Aura Brew couldn't just be a feel-good project. It had to be a brand. More than a cup, it's a connection. She designed a logo, a simple, elegant swirl of steam forming the letter A. She mapped out a supply chain that was not only ethical, but efficient. She rehearsed her presentation in front of her mirror until her voice was hoarse, trimming every excess word, sharpening every point until it was a weapon. The final piece of the puzzle was her attire. Business professional on a billionaire's yacht was a code she didn't know how to crack. She couldn't afford a new suit, so she went to a high-end consignment shop in the West Village, a place she usually just window shopped. After an hour of searching, she found it a sleek, dark navy sheath dress by a designer she'd only ever seen in magazines. It was simple, powerful, and fit her as if it were made for her. It cost nearly a week's pay, but as she looked at her reflection in the store's mirror, she saw not Mia the waitress, but Ms. Alvarez, the founder and CEO of Aura Brew. It was an investment in herself. By Friday night, she was utterly exhausted, surrounded by scattered papers and an empty coffee pot. Her presentation was loaded onto a thumb drive. Her dress hung pristine on her closet door. She had done everything she possibly could. She felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a feeling of readiness. She might fail. Matteo might be right. This could all be a humiliating disaster. But she would not walk onto that yacht as a waitress hoping for a handout. She would walk on as a professional with a viable, well-researched business. She would meet the shark on his own terms, not as prey, but as someone with something valuable to offer. She sent a text to Matteo. "Ready for tomorrow. Don't worry, I've got this." As she finally drifted off to sleep, the last image in her mind was of Julius Croft's face at the restaurant. That look of stunned calculation. "Impress me," the card had said. Tomorrow, she thought she would do exactly that. At precisely 1 p.m. on Saturday, a black Mercedes sedan so sleek and silent it seemed to absorb the sounds of her noisy Queens Street, pulled up to Mia's apartment building. The driver, a man in a crisp suit and sunglasses, didn't honk. He simply stood by the open rear door, waiting. The sight was so incongruous with the backdrop of graffiti-adorned brick and overflowing trash cans that Mia felt a fresh wave of surrealism wash over her. This was happening. She clutched her tote bag, the slim thumb drive, and her leather notebook nestled safely inside. The navy dress felt like armor. As the car whisked her away from her world and towards the gleaming canyons of Manhattan, she practiced her opening line in her head, her heart keeping a steady, anxious rhythm. Chelsea Piers was a world away. Sunlight glinted off the Hudson River, and the air smelled of salt and diesel. And then she saw it. The Serenity. It wasn't a boat. It was a floating architectural marvel. Over 200 feet of gleaming white superstructure and smoked black glass. It was less a yacht and more a private mobile island of staggering wealth. It was aggressively modern, a blade of a vessel designed to cut through the water and the noise of the world with equal disdain. It made the other multi-million-dollar yachts docked nearby look like dinghies. A man in a white uniform met her at the gangway, his smile as polished as the chrome railings. "Ms. Alvarez, welcome aboard. Mr. Croft is expecting you." He led her not to a sunny open deck, as she might have imagined, but into the yacht's interior. The shift was jarring. The outside world vanished, replaced by a cool, climate-controlled silence. The decor was a masterclass in minimalist luxury floors of pale, wide plank oak walls of cream-colored leather and stark modern art that probably cost more than her entire college fund would have. It was beautiful and utterly sterile, a gilded cage designed to insulate its inhabitants from the messy reality of the world. She was led into a spacious lounge that served as a floating boardroom. A long, dark wood table dominated the space, surrounded by a dozen plush chairs. At one end, a massive screen was seamlessly integrated into the wall. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline, a silent, powerful backdrop to the proceedings. And there they were, the sharks. Julius Croft stood by the window, his back to her, talking in low tones with another man. He was dressed in casual but exquisitely tailored grey trousers and a black cashmere sweater, the picture of relaxed power. He turned as she entered, and for a moment their eyes met across the vast room. His expression was unreadable, a blank slate of polite neutrality. There was no trace of the flirtatious man from the restaurant. This was the architect in his natural habitat. "Miss Alvarez, welcome," he said, his voice formal. "Thank you for coming." Seated at the table were 4 other people. 2 men in sharp suits who looked like they'd been born in a boardroom, and at the head of the table directly opposite the presentation screen, a woman who immediately commanded Mia's attention. She was in her late 40s, with a severe, chic black bob and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a tailored crimson pantsuit that was a slash of color in the otherwise muted room. She radiated an aura of sharp, unforgiving intelligence. Her gaze swept over Mia from her consignment shop dress to her sensible shoes, and a flicker of something disdain perhaps crossed her features before being instantly suppressed. Julius made the introductions. "This is my board. Michael Corrigan, head of acquisitions. David Chen, our CFO. And he said, gesturing to the woman in red, is Evelyn Reed, our chief operating officer. Evelyn essentially runs the empire." Evelyn Reed. Mia knew the name. She was legendary in business circles, Croft's iron fist in a velvet glove. She was known for her brutal efficiency and her fierce, unwavering loyalty to Julius. Her presence here confirmed Matteo's worst fears. This was not a friendly chat. This was a trial by fire. "Mr. Alvarez," Evelyn said, her voice as sharp and precise as her haircut. She didn't offer to shake hands. "We have a very tight schedule. Mr. Croft has afforded you 30 minutes. The floor is yours." There was no small talk, no offer of water, no attempt to put her at ease. The message was clear. "You are an interruption. Impress us quickly, or be gone." Mia's mouth went dry. All her carefully rehearsed words, her confident opening, threatened to abandon her. She could feel their collective skepticism, a palpable force in the room. They were looking at a waitress, a novelty, a momentary diversion for their boss. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to remember the woman in the mirror at the consignment shop. She was not a waitress right now. She was a founder. "Thank you, Mr. Croft, Ms. Reed, gentlemen." She began, her voice steadier than she felt. She walked to the head of the table and inserted the thumb drive into the port. Her logo, the elegant A of Aura Brew, bloomed onto the massive screen. "My name is Mia Alvarez, and I am the founder of Aura Brew. For the past 2 years, I have been developing not just a new coffee brand, but a new business model, one that proves that profitability and social responsibility are not mutually exclusive." She launched into her pitch. She started with the heart, with Eleanor, and the Women's Cooperative in Colombia, showing pictures of their farm, telling their story. She saw a flicker of impatience in Michael Corrigan's eyes. She pivoted immediately to the numbers. The global specialty coffee market is projected to grow by 12% annually, reaching over $150 billion by 2028. She said, her voice gaining strength as she moved onto solid, factual ground. But consumers, particularly millennials and Gen Z, are no longer just buying a product. They are buying into a story, into a set of values. 73% of them state they are willing to pay more for products from sustainable and ethical brands. She put up her financial projections, her market analysis, her branding strategy. She spoke their language. She talked about disruptive potential vertical integration through her direct sourcing model and the marketing power of authentic storytelling. For 20 minutes, she poured out every ounce of her research, her passion, her soul. She never looked at her notes. She knew it all by heart. Throughout it all, Julius remained a silent, inscrutable figure by the window. The two men occasionally murmured to each other. But Evelyn Reed's eyes never left her. Her expression was one of intense, dissecting focus. It was Evelyn who fired the first shot. The moment Mia paused for breath, Evelyn leaned forward. "A very heartfelt presentation, Ms. Alvarez." She said the word heartfelt, sounding like an insult. But passion doesn't guarantee profit. Your startup cost projections seem wildly optimistic. You haven't accounted for the volatility of import tariffs or the logistical nightmare of dealing directly with a small, unproven cooperative in a politically unstable region. What's your contingency for when a shipment is seized at customs or your Colombian partners decide to sell to a higher bidder? The question was a dagger aimed at the very foundation of her plan. David Chen, the CFO, piled on. And your 5-year growth model. It assumes a level of brand loyalty that takes established companies a decade to build. You're a waitress. You have 0 management experience and 0 capital. Why would anyone believe you can execute this? It was an onslaught. They picked apart every slide, every number. They questioned her supply chain, her marketing budget, her lack of a track record. It was a relentless, brutal grilling. With every question, Mia felt a piece of her confidence being chipped away. They were twisting her strengths, her direct relationship with the farmers, her focus on community, and reframing them as fatal weaknesses. She did her best to push back, to defend her numbers, to reiterate her vision. But it was like fighting a multi-headed hydra. For every argument she countered, 2 more sprang up. She glanced at Julius, a desperate, silent plea for help. He was her only way in. He had invited her here, but he just watched his face, a mask of detached neutrality offering her no support. It was a public execution, and he was letting it happen. The final blow came from Evelyn. "Let's be blunt, Ms. Alvarez," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "What you have is a charming little hobby, a charity project dressed up as a business plan. It's admirable in a naive sort of way, but it is not a serious investment opportunity. You are wasting our time." The words hung in the silent, sterile air. Wasting our time. The fight went out of Mia. She felt a hot flush of shame creep up her neck. They were right. Who was she kidding Matteo had been right? This was a joke. She was the punchline. I see, she stammered, her voice small. "Thank you for your time." She turned her movements stiff and began to gather her things. All she wanted was to get off this boat, to escape their pitying, dismissive stares. She wanted to run back to her tiny apartment and hide. The dream of Aura Brew felt shattered, its pieces scattered on the floor of this cold, soulless room. She had never felt so foolish in her entire life. Humiliation was a physical thing. It was a burning in her cheeks, a hollowness in her chest, a leaden weight in her limbs. Mia fumbled with the thumb drive, her fingers suddenly clumsy. She couldn't look at them. She couldn't bear the sight of their smug, victorious faces. All she could see was the New York City skyline through the window, a world she had tried to conquer, and that had just thrown her back down with brutal indifference. She pulled the drive free and turned to leave her gaze fixed on the polished oak floor. She had to get out. Now. Ms. Alvarez. Julius Croft's voice cut through her haze of shame. It was quiet, but it held a new tone, an unmistakable command that made her stop her hand on the strap of her tote bag. She slowly lifted her head. He had pushed himself away from the window and was walking towards her. The other board members, Evelyn included, were watching him, their expressions a mixture of surprise and confusion. He stopped a few feet from her. His face, which had been a mask of neutrality, now held a glimmer of something else. Something that looked like respect. "That was a truly abysmal experience, wasn't it?" he said. The question was so unexpected, so blunt, that Mia could only stare at him. I'm sorry I wasted your time." She managed to say the words, tasting like ash. "You didn't," he said. He turned his head slightly to look at his board. "You may all go. The meeting is concluded." Evelyn Reed stiffened. "Julius, we have the quarterly review." "That can wait," he said, his voice dropping an octave, losing all its earlier collegiality. "Leave us." It wasn't a request. The shift in power was instantaneous and absolute. The two men, Corrigan and Chen, immediately began gathering their papers, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Evelyn, however, held his gaze for a moment longer, her lips pressed into a thin, angry line. She shot one last venomous look at Mia, before turning on her heel and striding out of the room, a thundercloud of controlled fury. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving Mia and Julius alone in the vast, silent lounge. The silence stretched thick with unspoken questions. "I owe you an apology," Julius said, finally his gaze softening. "That was a crucible, and I threw you into it without warning." Mia was bewildered. A crucible? It felt like an execution. "That was the point," he said. "The pitch, your numbers, the business plan. They're good. They're very good. Smart, well-researched, and full of the one thing most plans like this will lack: a soul. I knew that within the first 5 minutes." "Then why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you let them tear me apart?" He gestured to one of the plush chairs. "Please sit." Hesitantly, she sat on the edge of the chair. He took the one opposite her, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. The vast, intimidating room suddenly felt intimate. "The business plan wasn't the test, Mia," he said, using her first name for the first time since the restaurant. "You were. I don't invest in business plans. I invest in people. Ideas are cheap. Execution is everything. And execution in my world requires a spine of solid steel." He continued, his voice low and intense. "Evelyn, David, Michael. They are brilliant. They are also sharks. It is their job to find the weakness, to stress test every assumption until it breaks. Anyone I bring into this company, any project I fund, has to be able to stand in that fire. If you had crumbled, if you had gotten defensive or burst into tears, I'd have known you weren't ready. If you had been arrogant and refused to listen to their critiques, I'd have known you were unteachable." Mia was trying to process his words. "So what did I do?" "You stood your ground," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was different from the smile at the restaurant. This one reached his eyes. "You were battered. You were bruised. By the end, you were defeated. But you never stopped believing in your own argument. You defended your partners in Colombia. You defended your vision. You showed more grit in that 30 minutes than most of the Ivy League MBAs who pitch me show in a month. And then, when you thought you had lost, you accepted it with dignity. You didn't make excuses. You packed up your dream, and you were going to walk out of here with your head held high." He leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Let me tell you why that matters to me. When I was 22, I had an idea for a data compression algorithm. I pitched it to a venture capital firm. The partners did to me exactly what my team just did to you. They humiliated me. They called my idea a child's fantasy. I walked out of that room, and I almost gave up. I almost believed them. But something inside me, some stubborn, foolish pride, wouldn't let it go. I spent the next year sleeping on a friend's couch, living on ramen noodles and perfecting that algorithm. I sold it for $30 million and used that money to start Nexus Dynamics." He leaned forward again, his gaze locking with hers. "The money is the easy part. The hard part is holding on to that fire when the whole world is trying to extinguish it. I saw that fire in you at the restaurant. You weren't impressed by my money or my name. You had your own mission. You drew a line in the sand professionally and without drama. In my world, everyone says yes. Sycophants and flatterers are a disease. Your no was the healthiest thing I'd heard all year." Mia sat there stunned into silence. This whole elaborate, cruel setup was a character reference, the flirting, the invitation, the public flogging. It was all part of an incredibly unorthodox, high-stakes job interview. "The flirting was my clumsy initial attempt to see if you were just another person who could be bought or charmed." He admitted a hint of chagrin in his voice. "When you shut me down, you passed the first test without even knowing you were taking it." He stood up and walked over to a sleek built-in bar, retrieving a bottle of sparkling water and 2 glasses. He poured them each a glass and handed one to her. "Aura Brew," he said, raising his glass in a toast. "It's a great name, and it's a great idea. It's scalable, it's marketable, and it has a narrative that money can't buy. I want in." Mia stared at him, her mind reeling. You want to invest?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "I don't want to be a silent partner who just throws money at you. That's not what you need. You need a mentor. You need access. You need a shield to protect you from the sharks while you learn to swim. I'm offering you a partnership. We'll set up Aura Brew as a subsidiary of the Croft Foundation. You'll have full creative and operational control. You will be the CEO. I will provide the seed funding, the legal team, the supply chain logistics, and my personal guidance. In return, the foundation will take a 40% equity stake." He took a sip of water, watching her over the rim of the glass. "This isn't a gift, Mia. It's an opportunity, and it will be the hardest thing you have ever done. Evelyn will fight you every step of the way. She's protective, and she will see you as a distraction, a pet project. You will have to earn her respect. You'll have to earn the respect of everyone. But I will have your back. Sobittu, what do you say?" Mia looked down at her hands, then back up at the man in front of her. The whiplash of the last hour was immense. She had gone from the lowest low to a high she couldn't have even imagined. He wasn't the villain Matteo had described, nor was he a fairy godmother. He was something far more complex, a kingmaker looking for a worthy successor. She thought of her cramped apartment, her worn-out notebook, the women in Colombia who were counting on her. This was it. The door she had been pounding on her entire life had just been blown off its hinges. A real smile, the first genuine, unburdened smile she'd had all day, touched her lips. "Mr. Croft," she said, her voice clear and strong, "you have a deal." Julius Croft was true to his word. The offer wasn't a gift, it was a declaration of war. The weeks that followed the meeting on the Serenity were the most grueling and exhilarating of Mia's life. She was thrust from the predictable rhythm of restaurant life into the dizzying high-stakes world of corporate empire building. Her first day at the gleaming monolithic Nexus Dynamics Tower felt like stepping onto another planet. She traded her waitress uniform for the sleek navy dress which became her new armor. Julius gave her a spacious, minimalist office with a breathtaking view of the city, a view she was usually too busy to notice. He provided her with a small, dedicated team, a sharp, young financial analyst, and a logistics expert who could navigate the labyrinth of international trade. But Julius's most significant provision was also her greatest obstacle, Evelyn Reed. As Julius had predicted, Evelyn saw Mia as an indulgence, a whimsical pet project that distracted from the serious business of making billions. Her hostility was not overt. She was too professional for that. It was a campaign of 1,000 paper cuts. Important emails from Mia would go unanswered for days. Meeting requests were lost in a busy schedule. When they did meet, Evelyn would subject every one of Mia's decisions to withering scrutiny, questioning her budget, her hiring choices, and her marketing strategy with a surgical precision designed to undermine her confidence. "You are leading with your heart, Ms. Alvarez," Evelyn told her during one tense budget meeting, her voice dripping with disdain. "That is a fatal flaw in business. The market does not reward sentimentality. Your insistence on paying your Colombian farmers 30% above the fair trade baseline is charity, not a sustainable business practice. It's a drag on our margins. It's an investment in our supply chain and our brand's authenticity, Ms. Reed," Mia countered, her hands clasped tightly under the table. "Our story is our greatest asset. If we compromise on our core values, we become just another coffee company. Our customers are buying our integrity." "Your hypothetical customers," Evelyn sniffed. "We have yet to see a single dollar of revenue." It was a constant battle of wills. Julius refused to intervene directly. "This is your company, Mia," he'd said. "You have to learn to fight your own battles. Evelyn respects strength. Show her yours." So Mia fought. She worked twice as hard as anyone else. She learned to read financial statements like a second language. She immersed herself in the complexities of logistics and international law. She learned to counter Evelyn's cold, hard data with her own, proving that ethical practices could create fierce brand loyalty that translated directly into long-term profitability. She used the same grit she'd developed during a decade in the service industry. The patience, the resilience, the ability to read people and de-escalate conflict without sacrificing her position. The climax arrived 3 months later. An opportunity arose to lease a prime retail space in Soho, a perfect location for the flagship Aura Brew Cafe. It was an expensive, high-risk move, and Mia knew Evelyn would be vehemently opposed. The decision had to be approved by the Croft Foundation's investment committee, which Evelyn chaired. The meeting was a setup for her slaughter. Evelyn had come prepared with a mountain of data, showing why the lease was a reckless gamble. She presented charts on declining foot traffic in the area, the high rate of failure for new cafes, and the enormous overhead costs. She painted a picture of Aura Brew as a financial black hole, a passion project bleeding the foundation's resources dry. The prudent course of action, Evelyn concluded, addressing the committee but staring directly at Mia, is to abandon the brick-and-mortar concept and pursue a wholesale-only model. It's lower risk, lower overhead, and has a faster path to profitability. The committee members, all seasoned executives loyal to Evelyn, murmured in agreement. Mia saw her dream of a community hub, a real-world space for connection, about to be dismantled in favor of a sterile, soulless distribution plan. Then it was her turn. She didn't use a slideshow. She didn't use spreadsheets. She stood up and spoke from the heart, but it was a heart now armed with the language of their world. "Ms. Reed is correct," Mia began, shocking the room into silence. "From a purely traditional financial perspective, this is a high-risk move. Her numbers are accurate, but they are incomplete. They don't measure the value of community. They don't measure the marketing power of a physical experience. Aura Brew was never just about selling coffee beans in a bag. It's about selling a feeling, a sense of belonging. That is something you cannot create online." She then did something unexpected. She told them a story about Ethelgards. She described the quiet loneliness of men like Julius Croft, surrounded by wealth, but starved for genuine connection. She talked about her own experiences feeling invisible and how a simple, kind gesture in a physical space could change the course of a person's day. "Our flagship store won't just be a cafe," she said, her voice ringing with a passion that was now backed by unshakable confidence. "It will be our billboard, our content creation engine, our community center. It's where our story comes to life. You cannot put that on a balance sheet, but it is the most valuable asset we will ever have. It's what will make us not just a successful company, but an important one." She looked directly at Evelyn. "You called my plan sentimental. I call it strategic. You see weakness in paying our partners a living wage. I see strength in a secure, loyal supply chain. You see a liability in this lease. I see the birth of a beloved brand." She sat down. The room was silent. Julius, who had been observing from the side, gave her the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. One of the committee members, a man who had been frowning throughout Evelyn's presentation, spoke up. "Her passion is compelling." "It's more than passion," Julius said, his voice filling the room. "It's vision. I second Ms. Alvarez's proposal. We're signing the lease." The decision was final. Evelyn was overruled. In the hallway after the meeting, Evelyn stopped Mia. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "You won this round, Ms. Alvarez," she said quietly. "But do not mistake a single victory for winning the war. I will be watching." "I know," Mia said calmly, "and I'll be working." It was a turning point. Mia had not only won the argument, she had won the respect, however grudging, of her adversary. She had proven she was not a pet project. She was a CEO. A year and a half later, the Soho Aura Brew Cafe is a stunning success. The smell of rich, ethically sourced coffee mingles with the buzz of conversation from freelancers on their laptops, students studying in cozy armchairs, and friends catching up. On one wall, a huge, beautiful mural depicts Elena and the women of the Colombian cooperative, their smiling faces a testament to the brand's promise. Mia no longer in a waitress's uniform or a borrowed power suit, but in jeans and a simple Aura Brew sweatshirt, moves through the space greeting customers by name. She's a CEO, yes, but she hasn't forgotten the feel of tired feet or the sting of being invisible. She has implemented a profit-sharing program for her employees and hosts free workshops for aspiring entrepreneurs from underserved communities. Julius Croft is a frequent, quiet customer, often seen in a corner with his laptop, observing the vibrant community she has built. Their relationship has settled into a deep, respectful partnership, a bond forged in fire. He gave her a chance, but she built the empire. Her story is a testament to the fact that true power isn't about the money you have, but the integrity you refuse to lose. It's a reminder that sometimes the most revolutionary act is to simply stand your ground, to know your worth, and to turn a billionaire's challenge into the foundation of your dream. Thank you for listening. If Mia's journey from a defiant waitress to a game-changing CEO inspired you, please hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story about the hidden power within ordinary people. What did you think of Mia's decision? Let us know in the comments below.